Some voices weren't just beautiful, they were terrifying. Notes so high, so dangerous, that even the bravest sopranos trembled. One woman dared the impossible, Mado Robin, the French soprano who conquered the dreaded F6, the note that breaks careers and crowns legends. Her F6 wasn't just a note, it was a weapon, a legend that still haunts opera stages today. Tonight, on Opera Brownn, we reveal how she defied the impossible and left a legacy that echoes across the world of opera. In opera houses around the world, echoes of her brilliance serve both as inspiration and challenge for today's singers. When I first heard her F6, I was stunned. It felt like touching the sky. Mado's voice was a force of nature, reminding us that the impossible is merely a barrier we've yet to conquer. Mado once said, "In every note, there lies a universe." Her universe soared above us all. And so, with each rising star, her legend continues. A never-ending opera that transcends time.
Mado Robin and the Impossible F6, the Queen of the Night story. A note so high it feels like a shard of glass hanging in the dark, an F6. It's a sound that seems to exist outside the body, a pinpoint of pure light. Now imagine it produced without a warm-up. No digital tricks, no safety net. Just a sound so pure it could calibrate a laser. That's not a note, it's a dare. For most world-class sopranos, that F6 is a treacherous summit they might attempt once a year. A loaded weapon they handle with a mixture of reverence and terror. Mado Robin, she used it like a party trick. A casual flash of brilliance and she could go even higher. Stick around and I'll introduce you to the quiet French girl who took Mozart's most feared aria, the Queen of the Night's Der Hölle Rache, and turned it into her nightly playground. This is the story of how lungs, nerve, and a larynx seemingly built on a miracle didn't just sing history, they rewrote the very definition of what was physically possible. Mozart was famously merciless, a genius who treated the human voice as another instrument in his orchestral arsenal. For his Queen of the Night, he engineered a 2-minute vocal obstacle course that climaxes on a note 49 keys above middle C, a legendary trial by fire in the world of opera. It's the Everest of the soprano world, a peak many train their whole lives for and never conquer. In post-war Paris, a city still breathing dust and desperately dreaming of spectacle, a young woman who was already a widow and a single mother stepped onto the stage. She smiled, took a breath, and detonated that final high F with a casual, terrifying ease. Overnight, Mado Robin became the ghost every coloratura still has to contend with. This isn't just about a high note. This is about how a shy girl from a town without a single metronome became the phantom every soprano hears when the conductor raises his baton for Mozart's revenge. The Village and the Voice, Isère-sur-Creuse, 1918. A dot on the map of rural France, a place with one main street, a couple of bakeries, and a church organ that sounded more tired than holy. Madeleine Marie Robin grew up here, humming hymns over the noise of her father's trucking business. There was no Juilliard dream, no ambitious stage mother pushing from the wings. There was just a small, impossibly clear voice that seemed to float effortlessly over the priest's droning baritone, a silver thread in a tapestry of tweed. For years, it was just a local curiosity. But when she was 13, her parents finally sent her to the nearest voice teacher, a retired tenor named Mario Podesta. After hearing her sing a single ascending scale, he tore up their bill. The story goes, he told them, "She sings for free now or I go down in history as the idiot who let a Ferrari rust in a barn." At 16, her voice reached the ears of the legendary baritone Tito Ruffo, who was, in his own words, blown away. A year later, she boarded a train to Paris, a teenager with a prodigy's voice and a peasant's humility, won first prize at the Paris Conservatoire's soprano competition, and secured her future just as the world prepared to tear itself apart. A star is born from a city's ashes. The war delayed her debut, but it couldn't silence a voice like hers. She became a star on the radio and on records before she ever set foot on a major opera stage. Her voice a disembodied miracle traveling through the airwaves into homes starved for beauty. When Paris was finally liberated in 1945, the city was desperate for light, for magic, for something that felt like a firework. Cue Mado Robin. That same year, she made her formal debut at the Paris Opera, not in some minor, forgettable role, but as Gilda in Verdi's Rigoletto. Behind the curtain stood a young woman who had already weathered unimaginable loss. Her husband, an Englishman named Alan Smith, had been killed in a car accident shortly after the war, leaving her a widow and single mother in a recovering nation. But on stage, armed with a hand-me-down costume and a top register that could strip paint from the cherubs on the ceiling, she was a revelation. Soon after, she took on Lakme and its notoriously difficult bell song. Reviewers fumbled for words, writing the same stunned sentence in 3 different languages. Where did that impossible extra octave come from? By the end of the season, her name was in lights and a legend had been forged in the heart of a healing city. The aria every soprano fears, but her. Der Hölle Rache is 2 minutes and 55 seconds of controlled fury. It's a minefield of staccato runs, furious arpeggios, and acrobatic leaps that culminates in that infamous F6. Most divas approach that final note like a Fabergé egg balanced on a tightrope. Touch it perfectly once, bow, and get off the stage before it shatters. Mado treated it like a tennis ball she could bounce whenever the mood struck. But here's where the story tips from exceptional into the truly insane. For her, the F6 wasn't even the ceiling. She was a rare type of singer known as a soprano acuto sfogato, with a voice that could comfortably soar even higher, reportedly touching a D7 in live performance, a note so high it barely registers as music, existing on the bleeding edge of human hearing. A legendary moment from a 1949 radio broadcast tells the whole story. The conductor, seeking a brighter sound from the orchestra, made a terrifying on-the-spot decision. He kicked the entire area up a semitone. The musicians panicked, their eyes wide with fear, but Mado just gave a little shrug, and when the moment came, fired off an F-sharp 6 so clean, so effortless, you could calibrate a tuning fork to it. That recording is still passed around by singers today, slowed to quarter speed as they hunt for a flaw, a moment of strain. They never find one. The physics of a miracle. So how is that even possible? Go to a grand piano, find middle C, and sprint 49 keys up the keyboard. You've left the territory of sopranos and are now firmly in piccolo territory. To produce an F6, vocal folds thinner than a single strand of thread must vibrate together at an astonishing 1,397 times per second. It's a frequency that borders on the physically impossible for most bodies. When ear, nose, and throat specialists examined Mado, they found a biological anomaly. Her laryngeal cartilages could pivot at an angle other singers couldn't, tightening the airway to a microscopic aperture without choking off the breath. This, combined with a unique nasal port that functioned as a natural built-in amphitheater, created a human loudspeaker capable of impossible precision and power. But this gift was tethered to relentless discipline. Her routine was ironclad. 3 hours of chromatic scales daily, a kilometer of swimming to keep her ribcage elastic and powerful, no chocolate, and gallons of chamomile tea. She claimed she could feel a milligram of swelling in her throat the way a tightrope walker feels a sudden breeze. This wasn't just raw talent. It was a level of physical discipline and anatomical rarity that happens once in a century if you're lucky. Superstars and backstage whispers. By the 1950s, Mado was a cultural icon in France. The great Edith Piaf, the voice of Parisian heartbreak, once joked that only Mado Robin could hit a note higher than Piaf's own sorrow. Yet the global superstar was famously undiva-like, remembered by colleagues as sweet, humble, and almost apologetic for her own talent. Of course, the bigger her fame, the more the myths grew. Stagehands swore she refused to sign any contract typed on a Friday, and that she wouldn't travel anywhere without a chipped St. Christopher medal she kept in her pocket. The most famous legend took place in San Francisco in 1954. As she prepared for her entrance as Lucia, a thick bay fog rolled in from the water. The harbor's massive foghorns began to blast their low, mournful calls, drowning out the orchestra entirely. Instead of panicking or retreating, Mado simply walked to the center of the stage and stood in total silence. For nearly a full, excruciating minute, she waited. The audience held its breath. When the horns finally quieted, she began the mad scene a cappella, her voice cutting through the tension, holding thousands of people in the palm of her hand. Critics called it an act of operatic meditation. Mado just called it a Tuesday, the Cold War concert that became a legend. The year is 1959, the absolute height of the Cold War. Mado embarked on a grueling 16-concert tour of the Soviet Union. The final stop was a performance of the Magic Flute in Leningrad, a city still scarred by war and shrouded in political tension. During the final rehearsal, the city's ancient, overloaded power grid gave out, plunging the grand, gilded auditorium into absolute, suffocating darkness. The orchestra, disoriented and unable to see their music, trailed off into a confused silence. A nervous murmur rippled through the hall, but from the stage a single perfect note cut through the black. Dressed in a heavy coat over her costume to fight the unheated theater's chill, Mado began singing the Queen of the Night's aria with no music, no prompter, and no light. When the power flickered back on midway through her performance, the audience erupted with such force that the conductor had to stop and restart the piece just to calm the hall. The next morning, the state newspaper, Pravda, ran a simple, astonished headline, "The Nightingale Defies Physics." In the chorus that night, a young, cash-strapped singer clutched his program, a souvenir he would keep for the rest of his life. He was a future baritone king, and even he knew he had just witnessed a miracle, tragedy in 2 acts. Her voice sounded immortal, a thing of air and light, but her body was not. In 1959, shortly after her triumphant Soviet tour, doctors diagnosed her with cancer. They gave her an impossible choice: aggressive, debilitating treatment that would mean silence or a managed decline that would let her keep singing. She chose to keep singing, opting for medication that would manage the searing pain between performances. She lived a grueling, heroic cycle: perform, collapse, recover, repeat. The Opera Comique began planning a massive gala for her birthday, an event that would also mark her 1,500th performance in the role of Lakme. She joked to a friend that she'd prefer they hire half the orchestra so she could finally hear herself think. But just weeks before the milestone event, during a performance, a bolt of pain speared her mid-aria. She faltered, her legendary breath control failing her for the first and only time. She managed to whisper an apology to the stunned audience and vanished into the wings. It was the last time she would ever sing in public. On Christmas morning 1960, she fell into a coma. Legend says her friends sat by her bedside, softly humming the flower duet. Mado Robin died 4 days later at just 42 years old. A legacy measured in hertz. Ask any modern coloratura, from a rising star to a reigning monarch of the role like Diana Damrau, about the Queen of the Night, and they'll say the same thing. You start with Mado Robin's recordings. Orchestras still tune their piccolos to her F6, claiming it keeps the entire orchestra honest. In her hometown of Isure-sur-Creuse, the tiny Musée Mado Robin displays her sweat-stained costumes, her worn-out St. Christopher medal, and the batons of conductors she famously outheld on a final note. Every July, the town hosts a festival where young singers from around the world come to chase her ghost, all of them reaching for her impossible note. To this day, no one has perfectly nailed her effortless F6 in public at the festival. Instead of a trophy, the winner is handed a single silver feather, a nod to Mado's own belief that the voice should float, not stomp. The legend still leaves room for mortals. If the story of Mado Robin and her impossible voice gave you chills, just imagine the other legends waiting to be discovered. That's what we do here at Opera Brownn. We uncover the passion, the drama, and the sheer wonder of the greatest voices in history. To join our community and explore more stories that seem too incredible to be true, hit that subscribe button, and be sure to ring the bell because you won't want to miss our next deep dive, the scandalous opera premiere that literally started a riot.
Mado Robin never claimed she owned the high F. She once said she was just borrowing it from the night itself. But for over 70 years, she has set the standard. Whenever a soprano steps into that lonely circle of light and sees Mozart's treacherous score glaring back at her, she's not just facing the music, she's facing the ghost of the French girl who proved the impossible is just another warm-up. The Queen of the Night is a fictional sorceress armed with vengeance, but the real crown belongs to a quiet woman from a village you still can't easily find on a map. She sang higher than science said was possible, and with more heart than her own tragedy should have allowed, leaving behind a benchmark that still whistles through the halls of opera like a dare wrapped in starlight. So the next time you hear that aria, and you will, listen for the echo that refuses to land. Somewhere up past the limits of the staff, in the silent space where music meets myth, Mado Robin is still holding that note like a lantern, lighting the way for anyone brave enough to follow. Mado Robin's voice was more than music. It was a force of nature, an emblem of courage, and a reminder that true artistry has no limits. The Queen of the Night aria, with its towering F6, continues to challenge sopranos to this day, and Robin's fearless legacy remains a guiding light for performers worldwide. If this deep dive into opera's most dangerous and exhilarating aria thrilled you, don't forget to subscribe to Opera Brownn. Explore more stories of legendary sopranos, record-breaking arias, and the operatic feats that history almost forgot. Keep listening, stay inspired, and let the music of Mado Robin lift you higher. Only on Opera Brownn.